Hi, everybody, and welcome to this group live chat. About 6 months ago, I asked some people to recommend some classic movies for me to watch, and one of them was 12 Angry Men, which is about a case where a jury deliberates and kind of changes their mind over time. So I thought it'd be interesting to have some other people discuss the case with me, thinking at some point it may have been live streamed. Obviously, Judge Gull. What's that?
That's why at Grainger, we're here for you with professional grade industrial supplies and fast delivery. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by.
That was me. I apologize. Technical difficulties already. So I asked these random people who have been following the case for a long time to join me, and we'll discuss our opinions as if we are the jury. So introducing in clockwise order in my screen, we have Steve from True Crime Web. Hi, Steve. He has law enforcement experience and has done a lot of testing on the case. We have Deb's True Crime Notebook.
Hello.
Deb does quite a few update videos on the case. Next up is Fig Solves, who's also done many deep dives on the case. Thank you for joining, Fig. We have Turbo, who has her own channel and has also attended many days of the trial and taken a lot of notes. So thank you for joining, Turbo.
Thank you.
Welcome. Teddy, who's not on screen, but he also was one of the people we met in line attending many days of the trial. Hi, Teddy.
Just a lurker. How's it going, guys?
Good. Thank you for joining. Susan Hendricks, who has a book called Down the Hill. There's a link to that in the description below. We all know who she is. Aspen Connor, who's still in Delphi for almost a month, losing a lot of sleep in line, attending every day of the hearing. He can join and also share his thoughts on the testimony that we've seen and heard.
You forgot ex-roomie.
I had to get away from you. That's why I left Indiana. Finally, number 9 is Kristen behind the crime door. Hi, Kristen. She has done many videos and live chats about the case. We are waiting for 1/10 person, and I'll join, add them when we're ready to go. So this is not totally formal. We'll try and get past any technical difficulties, but I guess I'll act as the foreman of the jury, and we'll start off by saying, what do you think, if we had to vote right now, would you vote guilty or not guilty? So I guess by a raise of hands, would you vote guilty?
Guilty.
Teddy, you have to be on the screen, Teddy and Turbo.
Oh, hell no.
Guilty. Guilty.
Guilty, guilty, guilty.
Wait,
Tom, do you think how we think this jury is thinking, or
no, how we would vote if we were on the jury? Hi, Marv. So last person is Marv from Beyond the Evidence. Thank you for joining.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Marv, line leader for a
Hello.
month and a half.
So Marv, I think all of us just voted guilty. Would you vote guilty?
Guilty. I'm right there with you.
So you would vote guilty. So
Yep.
I was concerned this would happen. I did not ask people beforehand what would they vote. So for people watching who are triggered, acting like we're all biased that we hate Rick.
It's not an
Feel
easy
free.
decision. There's a lot to sort
Yes.
through. But
So feel free in the comments below, as you can see in my banner at the bottom, if you think Rick is not guilty and you would vote not guilty, write NG for not guilty and show, let us know what kind of evidence you think will not make you change your mind to guilty. So I guess I do have a PowerPoint presentation for us to go through that I'll review real quick, just to show.
it's so
in case we need
impressive
to.
as always.
It is very impressive.
I don't know if this is going to get us all off the screen. I'll just show it real quick though.
I'm really impressed also by the jury, and I understand why it's taking them so long. This is just me chiming in because there was a lot to go through, but I found their questions to be very intelligent, and you could tell they were really focusing and listening to every aspect of it.
Absolutely.
I made that point on my video last night, Susan, as well. I think that, I'm not surprised this jury is taking their time and being
Because there is a
diligent
lot to go through, right?
about the
Yeah.
details.
All right, so I just made this just a case overview that I guess a lot of us know about it, but I just want to review it real quick. Abby and Libby were dropped off at the Mears parking lot around 1:48 p.m. and were supposed to meet Libby's father at that spot after he finished working around 3:15 p.m. But Libby did not answer her phone. A search ensued, and their bodies were found on the opposite side of the creek the next day around noon. Police found a video on Libby's phone taken at 2:13 p.m. that showed Abby walking off the end of the bridge and Libby saying that was the end of the trail. The man was following behind Abby, and at that point, Libby said to Abby when she got off the bridge, "That be a gun." Next, while Libby's phone was pointed at the gravel at the end of the bridge, a male voice said, "Guys," to which Libby replied, "Hi." Then he ordered them to go down the hill, and the video stopped, which we all know. So according to Richard Allen, the day of the murders, he said he went to his mother's and then returned home when they went to lunch. His sister and mom went to lunch. He decided not to go. So he drove home, and then he went to the trail, and he parked at the CPS lot. When he entered the trail, he passed 3 girls. He said some of them were younger, and he thought they could be sisters. He looked at his stock ticker on his phone as he headed to Platform 1 of the High Bridge to look at fish. Then he sat on a bench overlooking Deer Creek for a few minutes, according to him in his October 2022 interview. He saw an SUV and a sedan parked at the Mears parking lot. He said when he left, so I guess when he was walking back to CPS. And then he went home to look at stocks on his computer. So on February 16th, 3 days after the murders, he told police, I guess he walked into the sheriff's station and said, "I was there 1 to 3 p.m. 2 days later, he met with Dan Doolin and said, "I was there 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. So within a few days after the murders twice, he said, "I was there at 2:13 p.m. 5 years later, he said, "I was there noon to 1:30. Also in his October 22 interview, he said the times 1, 1:30, 1:45. I'll
That's
just
not sketchy.
What's that?
I said that's not sketchy at all.
I do think it is suspicious. So I'll just review these real quick and then we can discuss.
That's Tom's way of saying, don't interrupt, Teddy.
No.
I know.
Feel free to interrupt. So witnesses, I tried to group this by similar things. So witness bridge guy, Rayleigh Voorhees and Bree Wilbur, Betsy Blair, Sarah Carbaugh. We can debate these various testimonies once I'm finished with all this. Near the trail, bridge 300 North was Dave McCain, also known as Flannel Shirt Guy, Cheyenne and her friend Shelby H with her boyfriend or friend Daniel, Brad Heath, Teresa Liebert. Near the crime scene, former Delphi Fire Chief Daryl Sterrett, Pat Brown found the bodies. We know about Brad Weber, who owns the house, and Jake Johns, who saw clothing in the creek. Family members who testified. These are all people who testified during the trial. Becky Patty, Kelsey German, Derek German, Anna Williams. On Rick's side, his daughter and half-sister. Next up, I have a bunch of police officers that we can discuss their testimony if we want to. Another page of police officers. Mental health professionals who testified from Westville, Dr. Walla, Dr. Dwenger, and Dr. Martin. On behalf of the defense, Dr. Polly Westcott, Dr. Stuart Gracian, Dr. Eric Warren talked about the unspent round. Dr. Kaur did the autopsies. Warden Gallipo from Westville, who Rick said he wanted to confess to killing Abby and Libby. 9 prison guards total, or actually there may have been 8, I apologize. All of them said that Rick made incriminating statements. Finally, there's 2 more slides. I wrote this list of key evidence and some points to Rick being innocent, some points to him being guilty. If I forgot anything, let me know. 1:27 p.m., Hoosier Harbor Store video camera showing a car matching Richard Allen's, headed in the direction of CPS, not away. Research by law enforcement showed that Rick was the only person in Carroll County who owned a 2016 black Ford Focus SE. On the stand, Mullen said, Rick's hubcaps, you could see through them. You could see sunlight. Also, you could see sunlight through the car at 1:27 p.m. The unspent round, according to police, it matched Richard Allen's gun. Timeline changes are, as Teddy said, sketchy and suspicious. The bridge guy video and voice comparison, which there's a rumor that yesterday the jury wanted to review the bridge guy video, as well as Rick's October 26, 2022 police interview with Holman, possibly trying to determine, does that voice match up to Richard Allen? In Rick's favor, a lack of DNA matching his DNA at the crime scene, or any items found at Rick's home or in his car tying him to the murders. The blue jacket from Rick's home was never presented to the jury to show a match to Bridge Guy. So the blue jacket they took in October from his house, there was no blood or DNA found matching Abby and Libby on that jacket. So did he wear a different jacket on the day of the murders if he was Bridge Guy? His missing 2017 phone is sketchy also. We can discuss that later. Brad Weber's van, he apparently left work at 2:02 p.m. and went home. Richard Allen, in a confession to Dr. Wallace, said he saw a van during a time when he was trying to sexually assault the girls, which scared him. He took them across the creek and killed them. So we can debate if that timeline adds up or not. Rick said he used a box cutter, and the doctor who conducted the autopsy said the weapon could have been a box cutter, but that was after Rick made his comment about the box cutter being used, and then he threw it in the CVS dumpster. Rick said the girls he passed at the start of the trail around noon resembled sisters. He said that on October 13th, 2022 to Mullen. However, the group of 4 girls who passed Bridge Guy in that same spot about 90 minutes later, if Rick truly got there at noon, around 1:30, 3 of those 4 girls from Rayleigh's testimony were either sisters or half-sisters. So Richard Allen thinking these girls were sisters, and then the girls who actually saw Bridge Guy dressed just like Rick were actual sisters. It's kind of suspicious to me. Witness descriptions of Bridge Guy don't match Richard Allen. We know Betsy Blair said it was a young guy with poofy hair. However, I'm concerned that she was back by the barricade and said she looked for a moment. And we know that Richard Allen said he was wearing a skull cap and possibly a hoodie. I was disappointed in the prosecution for not asking her whether she was wearing contacts or prescription glasses to determine how good her eyesight was that day on the trail. Finally, no alibi for Richard Allen was presented at all to show where he was at 2:13 p.m. Final slide. Rick made incriminating statements / confessions to his wife, his mother, 7 Westville guards, 1 Wabash guard, Westville suicide companions, the Westville psychiatrist, and a detailed confession to Dr. Walla. Was he telling the truth or suffering mental issues? That's that. Anything you guys want to review? Any witness testimony? Any evidence? What do you guys think about the missing 2017 phone?
Well, I mean, technically,
is-
technically,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
mean, if
You
with
probably
its
have to say
alibi as
someone's
far as being
name,
on the
Tom.
bridge, he
Go on.
should have had his phone with him. So the fact that there is no, cell phone connection to him to the crime scene, I mean, that's a problem for the defense. So, and where's the phone? He seemed to have kept every other phone.
Exactly.
And they didn't harp on that either. They never said, you told us that you were on your phone looking at your stock ticker. Why don't we have any data saying your phone was there?
And I'm raising my hand.
Susan, okay.
I think that a lot of what seems kind of flippant to us has been planned by the prosecution based on how much time they had. And some of it, you're right. Some of it felt like like the jury questions, which were so brilliant. So that they went on the hall and they did that. But I feel like the biggest evidence, for me at least, because you could refute the bullet, I believe that kind of experts cancel each other out because they're paid. So each are going to say one thing on either side. I believe the biggest evidence is Richard Allen. I believe Richard Allen. I believe him to be true. I believe his confessions. I believe when he said what he was wearing at the bridge. I believe his first time when he said he was there at a specific time. And when he said, that is not me. If it's taken with the girl's phone, that's not me. Which was most pivotal to me was that first interview in October 2022 with Liggett and Mullins, when he didn't know he was in trouble at this point. Maybe he had a sense, but he didn't really know. He wasn't fully combative. And he was talking in his own voice. And you could see him differently than we've seen him in the courtroom. And I thought, that's the guy. He's capable. And I just want to clear this up because I've been asked so many times. 2 girls, how do you get control of them? A gun. I see that time and time again. People can't grasp that. A gun will make adults comply. Of course, 2 young girls. I believe Richard Allen's words are what is going to convict him.
I agree. And I don't know if you were sitting next to me in the courtroom at the time, Susan, but I think I leaned over to whoever was next to me and whispered, which is not allowed. I'm so sorry. But that I was like, that's Bridge Guy. Because it was really the first time I saw his body movements, his positioning, his size, and his voice all at the same time. And in that interrogation video, immediately and I of course like seek logic over instinct or intuition, but I immediately, my gut was like, that's Bridge Guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And to Susan's point, Steve, you correct me if I'm wrong, but direct evidence is something like a confession. So a confession of something only the killer would know, that is direct evidence. DNA is circumstantial evidence. People don't realize that, but it is, because DNA alone doesn't tell you anything. Like there's Kelsey's hair at the scene. It doesn't mean she committed the murder. There's a story behind that. So I agree, there's direct evidence, and now we're supposed to weigh them the exact same, direct evidence and circumstantial. And in this case, you have both. There is direct evidence and there is circumstantial evidence. And I think that builds a strong case for the state.
I also, my feeling is that Richard Allen is his own worst enemy, and he is actually, his words are going to be what convicts him in this case. I've always said that, and I've said this so many times on my own lives, my own channels, but when Richard Allen is out there and he doesn't see Bridge Guy, to me, that's huge. Everybody else saw Bridge Guy that day and was able to describe him. And Richard Allen is there at the exact same time, in the exact same place, and didn't see Bridge Guy. Why is that? He didn't see Bridge Guy because he is Bridge Guy. And bottom line, that's the end of the case. Because if Richard Allen is proven to be Bridge Guy, that's felony murder in the state of Indiana, because Bridge Guy is who kidnapped them off the bridge. And that's where everybody's losing sight, I think, because I think he committed this crime, but I'm still saying that that's not how far that the prosecution has to go to get a conviction here, which we all know. But yeah, I mean, that to me is huge. And then 61 confessions, give me a break. We're lucky in law enforcement to get one confession, and you get 61 and you get confessions with all of these different things that only the killer would know coming out. The fact that he said a box cutter, and you have a professional that does tons and tons and tons, thousands upon thousands, I believe he said, of autopsies, and he sees all sorts of wounds, and he himself says, wow, box cutter on the stand. I mean, to me, that says so much.
Well, and
again,
I think we need
back
to
the whole confessing to his mother. That's the other big red flag for me. I don't think there's anybody out there that's going to look at their mother and tell them that they did this horrible crime if they didn't. They're going to tell her they didn't do it. They're not going to admit to doing it.
Yeah. The box cutter thing is questionable because it came after, like he said, which I didn't even think, because of his story, his resume, if you will. He said that he was in his garage and all of a sudden thought, oh, it's a box cutter. I didn't think that needed to be said. I think it actually hurt the prosecution.
Yes, and law enforcement did not, the prosecution, law enforcement, none of them knew at that time that he was going to say it was from a box cutter.
It didn't need to be said. That's one thing
I agree. May I raise a question? I'm something to what Kristen said about proving the felony murder. You know, to prove felony murder, all you have to do is prove that, you know, that Richard Allen is the man that led the girls off the bridge, because, you know, kidnapping then leads to the murder. Do you think it was a mistake by the prosecution to not have the witnesses say, look at Richard Allen in the courtroom and say, is this the man you saw on the bridge?
They couldn't say that because they didn't clearly see his face.
I think it would have been.
They all identified him as Bridge Guy.
Neither did we. We didn't see his face.
Yeah.
Well, but they also, the girls that saw him, the 4 girls, right, they were obviously walking right next to each other. You don't picture girls walking down a trail in a single file line. But even they had different views of who this person was. One said all black, one said, you know, a dark blue jacket. But at the end of the day, even Bree Wilbur, she told the police about this guy the night of the 13th before the picture even came out. And you can imagine, if you're out there looking around, you see somebody walking on a public hiking trail, you're not going to know exactly what they had on or all their features, but They didn't see his face. They just said that he looked really sketchy. He had this certain type of clothing on. And as soon as they saw the photo that Friday or whatever the day was, they all said, yeah, that's him. This is long before Richard Allen ever came into the picture. So if you think that it's just railroading this one person, they all agreed on this days after it happened. So
yeah, eyewitness testimony is so horrible. I've done probably too many research studies on it. And I just think, yeah, that it doesn't matter if their descriptions were wrong, as long as they all pointed out that it was Bridge Guy. And there's even a study that was interesting that if someone seems intimidating, or you're scared of them, you'll say that they were taller than they actually were. So, I mean, yeah, there's different things, components to it, but it's unreliable at best. So I think, yeah, it was kind of like they damned if you do, damned if you don't put those witnesses on, because you need them to help, I guess, validate a timeline and to say that they saw the person on the bridge. But of course, as we've seen with one of the witnesses, they've changed over time, like their descriptions of the times and who they saw, their height of the person. So, and that's what memories do when they get worse over time.
And Deb, I just wanted to jump in. I really loved your channel, and I follow you, but I liked how you put the not only the closings, but Nick's rebuttal to the closing, because I missed that. And so I really thought that was so poignant. And I wanted to know what you thought of that, how he mentioned Libby and wanting to solve the crime.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that it was a great emotional point to bring up, to put some responsibility on the jury to follow through with what she had already began and showing him in the video, and what her wishes would be. So I wanted to go off of what Fig said too. I had my own experience with that miscommunication of what you've seen as a witness in a crime, and as someone who found the perpetrator late at night in my neighbor's backyard. When I looked at him, I thought he was wearing a dark blue jean jacket. And when they took me around to the other side of the neighborhood to identify him, I was surprised that I had misinterpreted that. It was actually a dark blue members only type jacket. So I think that's very easy. You know, you look up quickly and your mind kind of tries to contemplate what you saw. It's
Deb, Susan and I have, and also Deb, you and I have talked about this before, is something that I always think is interesting to do on a live stream sometimes is you can be on a live stream for an hour, turn your camera off, ask people what color shirt you're wearing.
Yeah.
You would be amazed at the amount of people that have been watching you for an hour that don't remember. Or
Exactly.
And we all remember different things. You know, human beings, we just do. And we're not wired that way to recall all these little things that we see when you have no idea that you're going to have to be called to remember them or recall them. And that's, I know that one of my best friend's husband's is a judge, and he has always told me eyewitnesses are not reliable. And the reason they're not reliable is because they can see different, everybody sees differently and sees different, remembers different things. And that can be confusing to a jury when you have this person saying this. But to me and him himself, we talk so much about this case. The thing that's important here isn't so much what Bridge Guy was to them or what he even looked like, was the fact that they all saw the same man, and they all said that man in Libby's video is who we saw.
Right.
That's the damning thing for Richard Allen, because Richard Allen put himself there at the exact time frame, and there's no other person out there. No other person out there.
Tammy was next to me a lot of the time. She's the note taker extraordinaire. Tammy, what stood out to you in all the things that you watched during trial?
I just wanted to comment on two things. First of all, when Betsy Blair was recalled to the stand, I wasn't there. For those of you that were there, wasn't she asked about contact lenses or something like that? Or do I have that mixed up?
I was there, but I
Does
don't
anybody?
remember that.
Okay.
They
I
did say
thought
something
that
about
was
that, but I
reported
don't
on.
remember exactly what it was.
Okay. Okay. I have my jury questions pulled up for Betsy Blair, which she testified originally on day 4, which was Tuesday, October 22nd. And the jurors had just excellent questions. I think we all noticed right from the beginning. It just
Yeah.
went on through trial. They were paying attention. There was a wide variety of questions. And specifically for Betsy Blair, the first question that she was asked about was, what was your distance from him? And she said about 50 feet. The second question was, how could you determine that he was looking for someone else from that distance? And Betsy Blair replied that he was facing upstream when she got there, and then he turned when she came along. And the third jury question was, could you have mistaken a hat on the man as hair? And she said, I could have. So they were on it. They were paying attention about, her descriptions and whatnot. And I just found that was interesting, those questions specifically. Like, this jury was paying attention, and I have a lot more to say about them, but you guys continue on.
I don't mean to
Turbo,
take over. I
I
just
have
wanted
one
to hear
question,
from
Turbo.
Steve what he thought, because he hasn't said anything.
Well, I want to ask Mr. Steve, have you had any experience interrogating suspects, and can you add anything about confessions or false confessions?
In my career, I had one confession that was deemed false. And the individual was of a lower intelligence level. And you have to be extremely careful when you're interviewing certain individuals so that it doesn't come up in court. But some of there's so many variables of how law enforcement's trained, regardless if it's read technique or whatever you want to do out there, of how you have to approach this in these interviews. As far as confessions in controlled environment. And we have only how many of the actual controlled interviews do we have from law enforcement? It's far less than what was made by the offender or Richard Allen. And so in those controlled environments, like I said, there's certain things that the court analyze as far as the way you approach an individual, what's offered, what's threatening environments. And one of the things you can't do is of course, interview people that's under influence. And I don't think do we have any videos of where he's interviewed or at any point that he's under influence of any type of drugs?
Just the October 13th to 26th interviews where he seemed totally normal to me.
Yes. He did.
Okay. And that's the thing. And you have to be extremely careful. Law enforcement, we're trained to do those interviews properly. And 61 confessions of those that give great weight, I agree that the mother confessing to your mother is probably one of the strongest. I saw where someone was commenting the other day that while they listened to that conversation, he was in total control, didn't appear to be under influence, didn't appear to be under duress. And that's something that interviews that in our world of law enforcement that we have to look at and what carries the greatest weight, in my opinion.
I have a question for Steve when you guys have a
go
minute.
ahead.
Okay, Steve, have you ever come across a case where Richard Allen is such a common name, right? We know he's Richard M. Allen, and we know that when the lead was put in, it was put in as Richard Allen Whitman, right? Or Whiteman?
Whiteman.
Mhm.
There is an individual who lives in the area that is named Richard Allen Whiteman. Have you come across a situation where those names are so close?
yes, there's certain criminal families out there. Has nothing to do with that, but yes, if you just ask me, are there certain enterprises and families out there that use the same names? Yes. They name their sons, their grandchildren, their nieces, nephews. All of them carry the same name. It's so confusing. So it does occur, but this is a total different set of circumstances. Of whereas just by coincidence, we have an individual carrying a name living on a street that has that name. And it was just from my understanding, it was a mistake that was entered, and then it continued and escalated to develop what we currently have. I will say something of that Susan brought up a moment ago about the control. I have controlled in law enforcement. We control in our careers hundreds of thousands of individuals through verbal commands. And so you have someone that would have, being an adult versus children, the ability to control kids. And for those that you can't control by verbal command, I have controlled thousands of people at gunpoint. People respect firearms. We learn it at an early age, and throughout our lives, no one wants to go against that threat of what a firearm brings to the table. And for that, we have to absolutely put a lot of weight about how he was able to control these two children.
I just want to address this. So Purple Amarillo said they're disappointed that I have such a one-sided panel. So I did not ask any of these people what their verdict would be before I asked them to be on here. And I spent so much time researching this case and making PowerPoints for my own live chats that I don't really get a chance to watch many other of these channels, even these people on my screen. So I did not know what they were going to say.
Well, by no means, Tom, is it, you're always down the middle. Tom just presents the facts. I'm sure if you're a fan of Tom's, you know that. And even Becky Patty knew that. The families knew that. He was in court and they respect that. So it's not that we're all saying we want it to be this guy. We don't care, at least I'm speaking for myself, who it is. I want the right guy. I don't care if his name's Daryl, his other brother's Daryl. The bottom line is he put himself there. It's a small town. No one is around. I was there on a Saturday recently. No one is around. He was the only grown man who was off on a Monday, who's down there. He's admitting this to his mother. Most people lie to their mothers. He was down there. Yes, there is no DNA, but it wasn't a ghost. There's DNA from no one. He was there. He said what he was wearing in 2022. He said the time that he was down there, and Libby caught him on his phone and the voice matches. And I'm sorry that I'm upset, but I've been in this hotel room for 28 days. I'm turning into Jack Nicholson. I can't wait for it to come down and we hear guilty because I believe he did it. And by the way, the families don't want the wrong guy locked up. What do you think? We're all in a conspiracy? Like, let's get this random guy.
It's so crazy. I mean, that just really upsets me to hear that because it is, I mean, not you, Susan, but the whole thing about some random guy. We just picked this random guy from CVS to tack these charges on because he doesn't have a criminal history. And, you know, we just know that this is what we're going to do. Anybody that has common sense would know that it would have been so much easier to tack it on to Keegan Klein or to
Kristen, I know you know this. And we're not saying, at least I'm not, it's not a slam dunk. I thought it was stronger. It's not stronger. There is no DNA, right? And like Fig Solve said, that doesn't, you know, you can argue that these defense attorneys can argue everything away. What they can't argue away, they're going to argue away the ballistics. They're going to argue away the timeline. They're going to absolutely argue away the muddy and bloody. The way that Rosie was like, I wouldn't even consider her a witness. Oh, really? So you can explain away everything, but you can't explain away his own words that say, I was there. And when he was asked, is this you to Liggett? Well, not if the girls took it, but what if someone else took it? So that's what but again, I respect everyone's decision. It's not a slam dunk. And so the jurors, I think, are giving it the respectable amount of time.
And if you want to say also, I think it's one thing to be, I mean, I think that you can you can look at something objectively and still come to I mean, I think everything we've discussed has been fact-based. So, I mean, if you feel like it's a one-sided panel, I mean, the facts that we're discussing are things that have been presented in court. And I feel like we've already even talked about mistakes the prosecution's made. So I don't think it's a fair assessment to say that we're a one-sided panel. I
No.
myself think if Richard
Well,
Allen
crime
is
has turned divisive, and we see it out there. Let's not kind of tiptoe
Yeah.
around this. There are people that are turning into crime QAnon out there.
Yes.
And no matter what,
Mhm.
they're sticking up for this guy without the facts. So if you want to bring that up, that is what
Right.
we're looking at. Let's not
Exactly.
tiptoe around it.
And
It's turned divisive. We
why
all
would he
believe
have
in the
said,
system of a fair trial here. We all do.
Yeah.
right? Why would he have said, "Why would I say I did it if I didn't?"
And the
Absolutely.
way he said that too.
And the way
know-
it was said, yes. He
Yeah,
was
I would like to.
telling
I would
them
like to take
he did
advantage.
it.
I'd like to take advantage of. I think 5 or 6 of us were in the courtroom listening to those confessions. So Teddy, I'll start with you. Were you in there when the 7 phone calls were played?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and
how would you describe his tone of voice? Do you think the doctor said he noticed delirium in those phone calls? I did not. And the doctor never referenced exactly what in those phone calls qualified as delirium. So you believe his calls?
I believe the calls. I mean, I thought for sure that we would get some explanation as to why he did it, or something specific in his confessions, which we didn't. Those phone calls were him stating over and over again, I did it. I did it. The first few phone calls to Kathy, it was very.
And
I don't know
Teddy
what I
came
wanna
in
say.
with no opinion, by the way. Teddy came in with no opinion
Well,
to the trial.
I had an opinion, but I had a couple questions that I wanted answered for myself. I mean, that's originally why I went. I wanted to hear it straight from the source.
What was
and I
your
didn't want-
opinion? What was your opinion? when
I
you
was on
came
the
in?
fence. I was on the fence. I mean, again, even now, there's things that were presented or not presented that I can understand why it would be hard for a group of people
too.
that don't have any background on the case. But
Mhm.
a couple of the questions that I did have, they gave their explanation, and I was satisfied with it. It was just stuff that if you're not privy to the investigation, you're not going to have any knowledge about it, and you can't make decisions based on information you don't know. But listening to his phone calls, number one, they played the 2 interrogation videos first,
Yeah.
and listening to his normal voice
Yes.
was a little bit higher than I expected it, but we've all been on earth for a couple decades now. Like, everybody can tell how somebody sounds in their normal conversational tone and how they sound when they're trying to be quiet, I guess, and trying to sound intimidating. After you hear his voice for 2+ hours, to me, I said that right there is enough for me to say he's definitely Bridge Guy. Whether you want to say that Bridge Guy killed the girls or not, that right there was solidified for me. And I get it. There's most of the people out there haven't heard it, and they'll ask you, are you a voice analysis? Like, how can you tell? It's what I would say if we weren't talking about a trial right now. Like, yeah, I think this person is the person that said that they wanted to jump on a trampoline the other day, and we couldn't see their face in the video that somebody took on TikTok, but I can definitely tell that that's the person.
Teddy,
But-
I have a question on your response.
What?
Okay, at what point did you say, aha, that's him? When you only heard the interrogation tapes, or when you
Yep.
heard the one confession phone call and then the bridge video right after it?
Well, I didn't even need to hear the bridge video right after it, because that's ingrained into my brain at this point. So I had that in the background. But I actually can tell you where I said it's definitely him, because I wrote it in my notes. This is probably the 4th thing that I wrote down during his October 13th interview. And I started and I said, I can tell by his voice that it's him. I can
Yep.
tell. So it wasn't even after I saw both the interrogations and listened to his phone calls. It was definitely interesting, because that October 13th interview was in a much larger room, and the audio and the video were a little grainier. So it wasn't as clear as the 26th, but you can tell you heard him really calm in the beginning.
On
You
the
heard him-
13th, Teddy? On the 13th?
Yeah. Yep.
I thought
That-
so too. I think I was
Yep.
next to you in court.
Yeah, I mean, you heard him in especially that video. That's before he really knew that he was a suspect at all. He thought he was coming in and he was just going to have a nice little chat with investigators. And he
Well-
was joking around at first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very normal tone, and then it started getting heated as time went on, and they would slowly roll out what they had.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you this: does this sound like a coherent person when they called their wife from prison on 4/13/23, and he says to his wife, Kathy, I did it. I killed Libby and Abby. She said, no, you didn't. He said, yes, I did. He said, I did it. I killed them. I don't know why. She said, no, you didn't. He said, yes, I did. She said, they're messing with your mind. Something is wrong. They've done something to your food. And he said, no, I think I did. I think I did it.
Yep.
She said, why would you say that? And he says, I'm not sure. I did it.
Well, also to be fair, Dr. Martin did say,
and then he also wanted to apologize to the family. And he said, and I wish I could apologize to those families. And she said, don't talk anymore.
Sadly, that's explained away to me because he was in solitary. That's my opinion, though. If I could be wrong.
well, Dr. Martin said that day, April 13th, was the height of his psychosis, just to be fair.
And that was the phone call to Kathy that day. I mean, he did not sound. I mean, for anyone else that heard it, did he sound incoherent?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Not in any of
I
those.
think, Steve, you could jump in. Sorry, we're taking this over. Maybe I am.
I have a question for everyone that heard the confessions. Did Richard Allen apologize for any of the other things that he admitted to doing to other individuals that had nothing to do with this crime? Did he apologize to those families or to the world for starting World War III or anything?
He told Kathy at one point, all the other stuff I said I didn't do, but I did kill Libby and Abby. So he made a point to go back and say, like, hey, all this other stuff that I threw out there, I didn't
Some
actually
of
do
the
that.
stuff.
Yeah, some of the stuff. But
And
he said
did
a
say
lot.
he said to a guard, I'm acting crazy.
Turbo, wasn't there though false confessions after? Within those, he says, right? Or am I wrong on that? Like after, because there were 61 and he said things. The defense said he said things that weren't true. So yes, he did say that.
It was
I think
interesting.
he did mention World War III or something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was interesting that the defense didn't bring up some of those false confessions that we had seen, but I think that's because they were pertaining to what the inmates had said, and they had released those in the legal filings prior to trial.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to say a couple of things about that day. This was day 12, by the way, for the audio confessions. This was October 31st. And that was when we had Detective Harshman on the stand, who had listened to all the calls.
I'm sorry,
I had been away
Tom, I'd get that
on
comment
business.
off your screen. I'm sorry, with Kelsey German as a suspect. I really wouldn't.
I was going to say the same thing. I was like,
sorry,
disgusting.
Well, I want to include some of these opposing views. So what is your answer to somebody saying this on the screen?
That Kelsey did it?
That they're absolutely nuts.
Can I say something really quickly about Kelsey German?
Sorry.
People need to remember that Kelsey German was old enough to know what was happening when she went to live with her grandma and her step grandpa.
I need a water. I'm leaving.
Kelsey German was also then 16 years old when her sister was brutally murdered. Mm-hmm. And she's now spent the last almost 8 years of her life being accused of having something to do with that murder, with zero evidence, with zero anything. The girl was a child.
Yeah. Right.
So unfair for people to ever mention her name in connection with anything regarding guilt in this case. It's disgusting.
It is
disgusting. That person from your channel immediately for even saying it.
And I want to add something to that. Kelsey loved her sister. She was not only her sister, but she felt like she was a mom to her. She used to take care of her and mother her back when her parents had issues. Okay. And so in talking to Becky way before the gag order came on, that was one of the things Becky said to me that had devastated Kelsey, because not only did she have a sister relationship with her, but she had felt like a mom to her. And it is so disgusting to hear people accuse a 16-year-old girl at that time, who, with no evidence other than a hair. I can tell you that my family complains that my hair is on everything. I have dark wood floors here and I'm a blonde, and you can see that hair everywhere. Okay. It's on towels, bedding, whatever. My daughter's the same way. So it's ridiculous people need to stop listening to all the crazy conspiracy theory channels. Start listening to channels who are based on fact and show you evidence.
Yeah, and just use logic. Like Kelsey, okay, if the family killed the girls, why would they do it at home? Why would they take them out in the open to do it? There's
right.
Look at statistics.
This whole theory of that the reason it happens because one of the girls was pregnant, that is ridiculous. This is a family that had means. They would have just taken care of that and quietly taken care of a pregnancy and moved on. They wouldn't say, "Oh my gosh, now we have to kill her and her very best friend."
And the defense would have brought that up too. If that was the case, they would have said something about that.
Absolutely.
And they didn't, because just like all the other stuff.
Let's not give crazy. No, I've been listening. I feel like we need Gray Hughes on here too.
Let me just say one thing to finalize all this up.
Okay.
Everybody criticizes Kelsey for what she said, what she's changed, what she said. When you are a 16-year-old girl and you go through a trauma like that, having your sister brutally murdered, you're going to be mixed up.
Yeah.
You're not going to remember things clearly. You're not going to see things clearly. It's like having PTSD, if not actually having it. So if she said one thing one time and changed it up a little bit later, that's because as time goes by, her memories are coming back to her.
That's a
and
great
getting
point.
clearer.
But unless you're
And
the
you have
authorities,
no
really.
Right. Yep,
Right.
you have no right to sit there and criticize this girl when you have never been in her shoes.
And she was looked at. I mean, she was looked at hard by law enforcement.
You don't even have to go there, Kristen.
I mean,
wouldn't
it's
even go
so
there.
stupid.
Don't waste your breath.
Yeah,
No.
it's just stupid.
All right, can I get everybody back to the confessions just so we can have a nice little moment of
But I understand
so-
you guys want to give everyone a point of view, but if this guy doesn't get off the screen that comment, I'm leaving. It's just my life's too short.
I agree.
I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
All right,
It's
so
gross.
I want to ask everybody what they thought. The people that heard the confessions on the phone, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the ones that he made in April, the ones that he made in May, and then I believe there were a couple from June.
Mhm.
And in each one of those, one of the things that really solidified his mental state overall for me was he kept asking them, I need to know if you're still going to love me.
Mm-hmm.
You love me regardless. There was one phone call that was actually, it was 2 phone calls to Kathy on the same day. And he did his confessions and then called her a couple hours later. And his first words were, I need to know if you still love me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you didn't do this and you were just making random confessions, if you were coerced or whatever, you can insert whatever you want into that category. But why would you be so concerned about how your family feels when you know you didn't do it?
He really,
yeah.
I want to add something to that. I am a person who watches body language and facial expressions. And one of the things that I noticed when I was in court, when Warden Gallipo was on the stand, and he was talking about the form that Richard Allen filled out, the saying that he wanted to confess and that he'd hoped to apologize to the families. That form, as Warden Gallipo, or however you say his name, Gallipo, was presenting that information, the entire time I watched Richard Allen nodding his head yes. He was in agreement that he filled out that form. That's what he said, and that he did hope he could apologize to the families. And I think that says a lot.
And also,
well, I think when I was in court, I was only there one day, and I want to just say this, Tom, while I have a minute. Hats off to you and Aspen and Susan and Marv and Teddy and Turbo, who sat in that courtroom day after day and listened to some of the most horrific evidence in this case being shown and talked about. I was there one day, you guys, and it absolutely exhausted me emotionally and physically.
Yeah.
I'm thankful that I went, because I locked eyes with Richard Allen. And when he looked at me, he looked right through me. It was the most, I can't, it was chilling, guys. All I can say to you is it was a chilling moment for me. And I absolutely know that this is a master manipulator, this person sitting in that seat. And
Yeah.
I believe at 100% that they've got the right guy.
And also, just the fact that his confessions were over a 10-month period, writing a letter to the warden, calling his wife and mom, saying things to suicide companions. And then the last one that we know of, February 4th, 2024, a guard was doing his rounds at Wabash. So this is after Rick moved. He was crying in his bed, talking to himself, and overheard saying, "I am sorry for what I did. I am sorry for killing those girls." So I mean,
Thank you.
So many confessions over so long, it's suspicious as heck.
And he confessed before psychosis. Before he was on 413, I made a
before
timeline.
And after.
Before and after he was deemed having psychosis, and psychosis doesn't last the entire time. So yeah, he confessed before and after. So that destroys the defense's case right there.
April 13th was a pivotal day because that was the day that the multidisciplinary team was formed. It had Dr. Martin, the psychiatrist who administered the Halidol. Dr. Walla had gone for a sounding board to her superiors, Dr. DeWanger and I believe it was Dr. Harris. I couldn't hear it quite right. But that was the day that they formed that multidisciplinary team. And in the entire scheme of what has gone on with these the timeline for these confessions, it's very important to note these dates. I'm sure Fig and others have this all laid out nicely in a document or a spreadsheet or something. But what I would like to just touch on back to these confession calls is I have the dates from that day on day 12 with Dr. Harshman. And call number, I was seated directly behind Kathy Allen on this day. And so I could hear some of the things that she said, and there wasn't very much. But one thing I did note in my notes that I'm looking at right now is that when they played call number 1, which occurred on November 14th, 2022, when they first started playing each confession call, we would have the lead in of how much money was on his account. The current balance is $50. Hello, this is a pre-call from Ricky and it was recorded. And when that was playing, you could hear the other inmates in the background of him calling. And she leaned over to her friend and she said, "That's what I have to listen to all the time." And it was grunting noises of the other inmates. So it was at that time very much about her, right? From my observation, mine only. And I heard her say this as the call was playing. So on November 14th, we had call number 1. On April 22nd, 2022 is call number 2 to Janice, his mother. I noted that
2023.
Sorry, 2023, pardon me. I noticed that Alan was rocking in his chair and that Kathy's friend Christy, Lead with Love, was consoling her. I also noted that juror number 6, who everybody has talked about, he was the man in the top row closest to the door. He was looking at Kathy during this time. And then call number 3 was that was played for us, was April 3rd, 2023. Okay, and then we went to May 10th, call number 1. That was also to Kathy. Call number 4 was the second call on May 10th at 11:15 a.m. And that was Kathy again. And I had some notes on what the jurors were doing there, but I won't get into it here now. But just for the timeline, call number 5 was May 17th, 2023, and that was to Janice Allen at 10:22 a.m. And then we had June 5th, 2023. And after that call, in my book, I have it highlighted. Down the hill, that's a match. he sounds like BG to me. And that's when I knew, because I hadn't been there the day before, unfortunately, when the 13th and the 26th interviews were done and played. So this was the first time that I got to hear him for.
And Tammy, you and I, Turbo, sorry, you and I went over this. So your timeline, you're saying like when it aligns to when they're saying he's faking it, kind of, or faking the confessions.
When he's feigning, well, I actually interpreted all of these calls that they played to Kathy and Janice's wife and mother. I interpreted his tone as being quite stable. He was a bit emotional in the first couple. Yeah, no, I did not interpret any of them to as him being in psychosis or what have you, myself. I mean, that's that's another part of the timeline as to what was going on with him medically.
Well,
but call number 6 was.
Dr. Wallace testified that he was non-psychotic and organized in his telling of the crime.
Well, Tammy and I talked about this earlier, and Tammy, your point was, because I wrote down exactly the dates, and your timeline's excellent, but you were saying that essentially he was trying to tell his mom and his wife, I did this. No, I did this. No, they wouldn't let him say, I did it, and he wanted to. And then something flipped, if you could talk about that date.
Right. So Tom had mentioned earlier that and I believe Tom had said that April 13th was, quote, the height of his psychosis, but that's not what I had in my notes. I had that was when they did administer, and they formed this multidisciplinary team, and then he was administered the involuntary Haldol, and perhaps you guys have the date on that. I wasn't there when Dr. Martin.
April 13th was the date.
If you did a whole timeline on it, Fig, is it to where you can kind of coincide where maybe he got the discovery? What switched?
So April 3rd is when he first called Kathy, and that's what we were talking about today, Susan, with respect to he was not in psychosis when he called his wife, whom we'd heard multiple bits of testimony about from various doctors that he had this dependent personality. And when he was confessing to her specifically, who he had this relationship with, arguably with this codependent or dependent personality, she kicked it all back. She just denied it. And I think, and I mean, I don't know what the testimony was, but it seems to me his wife and his mother and anybody who would tell him that he was confessing to and to try to stop talking about it, he wasn't being heard when he was finally able to come clean about what he did. And you could argue, I could argue that that's what pushed him to this break, so to speak, this temporary break in his head, and where he gets to the point of needing an involuntary shot on the 13th.
And the reason I'm asking is I'm wondering right now or tomorrow morning when they start deliberating again, they'll be analyzing these calls, right? The dates and are they going to believe the defense that he was in psychosis because of solitary? And when you mentioned that the voices in prison, does that mean he's not in solitary? I thought he was in solitary, that you wouldn't hear voices outside. I don't know who can answer that.
Well, if you remember in the testimony about Cass County versus in the closing arguments that Nick made, he talked about how that he had people nearby that he could speak to in Westville and Wabash, that he would talk to the walls, that he would talk to people. And he kind of listed out a whole bunch of things that, basically show that his conditions were not any less isolated in Cass County as they have been in Westville and Wabash. And that was one of the things he said, is that he did have neighbors that he could, that he could speak to.
And I just want to point out here, my judge friend, he said to remind everyone whenever I talk about this, it doesn't matter what Richard Allen's mental health is incarceration. When he's incarcerated, that doesn't matter at all. what matters is what was his mental health on February 13th, 2017, when he was out there at the bridge. Was he in psychosis that day? Was he crazy? How was he living? What was he doing during that time? Was he being medicated? Was he being seen? No, he was working. He was holding down a job. He was being himself, you know.
So that's why the prosecution has to say he's bridge guy. And that's why the defense has to make sure he's not bridge guy. So it boils down to that. Do you believe he's bridge guy? And Steve, how do you think this is going to turn out? If you had a crystal ball, I guess.
Right. And in psychosis, you don't know right from wrong. And the fact that he covered the bodies knows that he knows right from wrong. Otherwise, he wanted to try to conceal.
They could explain anything away with odinous and sticks in garages. I don't know.
They're just trying to get their guy not to be bridge guy because they know if he's bridge guy, he's guilty.
Yeah. They're doing their job, right?
I think at that time on the bridge, someone saw him on the bridge. He said he went out to the bridge, dressed like bridge guy. So I don't know how people could think he's not bridge guy.
And I know that I tested it now with two people, Tom and Turbo. The first platform was much further than 50 feet from the beginning of the bridge.
Exactly.
I'm just grateful that they are sequestered. I'm truly grateful. I've never been more grateful. And I've never been more grateful that they are not selected from the county that we're in.
And now
they were from Allen County. I'm grateful. So I just wanted to ask, Steve, what do you think overall in assessment to this?
Let's imagine that no one was on that trail that day. That on the 14th, 2 young children were found in the woods. No one was there the day before. Who would be in jail? Who would currently be in jail right now on what has been presented to law enforcement and probable cause? There's only one individual that has checked every box that he went to law enforcement. If you took everybody else off of the chart and you only had him, who is the one individual that says, I was there that day. I was on the platform. I didn't see the girls, but I saw a white van during during the moments of the commission of the crime. So if we took everything else away and we only look at what one individual has brought to the table, that where would we be and what would our understanding of what the likelihood of a conviction would be? And that's where I think we're headed, that you could take everybody else's testimony away and just go by what Richard Allen has admitted to, the totality of that day, even from having lunch or having lunch with his mother and sisters and traveling, that everything is supporting that we have one offender that was there that day that committed a absolutely horrendous crime.
And we can all debate about like the confessions and whether he did them because of conditions at Westville, but what matters is what he was doing on February 13th, 2017. And he first said in the first few days, I was there. I arrived at 1:30, which totally adds up to the 127 Hoosier Harvester camera. Parking at CPS, passing these girls who he said he thought they looked like sisters, and the girls who saw Bridge Guy were sisters, like 3 out of the 4. Then he goes to Platform 1. Betsy Blair sees Bridge Guy on Platform 1. His noon to 1:30 timeline to me does not add up, and that's like the major reason why I would vote guilty.
And also with Betsy Blair too, I wasn't aware of this before, but she said that she knew what time she was there because she had her Fitbit information. So that does add to locking in the timeline of when she was out there.
She was captured on Hoosier Harvester video, arriving at Mears at 12:02, and then leaving at 1:15 to go use the bathroom at the library.
And she
passed his CPS at 1:15. No mention of seeing Richard Allen's car at 1:15. But at 2:15, when she left for good, she saw a car that she thought resembled her father's from the 1960s. Why didn't she see Rick's car at 1:15 if he was there until 1:30?
The same reason why people saw 2 other different cars at the same location around the same time, because eyewitness testimony usually sucks.
Yes. So 5 minutes before that, at 2:10, some man described it as a purple PT Cruiser in the same spot against the CPS.
And if you guys don't follow Greg Hughes, he maps out with a map and a timeline very specifically, because it is hard to follow, especially if you're not as familiar with the case, but he maps it out kind of where they were at what specific time. So if that's all you want to believe, that is why Nick McClelland said in the opening and in the closing, he is Bridge Guy. He put himself there. And I wonder, though, with the 4 counts, right? There's 4 counts, what they're discussing. We'll never really know. We can assess, but tomorrow, Monday, I'm wondering, will they come back with a verdict? And I'm hoping for one, I guess.
Yeah.
Susan, did Greg pay you? You've been plugging Greg quite a bit.
No, but he has the map. And I've
Yeah.
been talking to him during this time. It makes it simplifies it. He's not paying me.
It
but he
does.
should.
I
Well,
was
it's
really
really
surprised that they didn't do
awesome.
anything like
It's
that.
awesome
when they
work. I
explained it.
wish he could have. I wish the prosecution could have shown that to the jury.
They did. Nick did he did in the closing statements when the thing worked. Because remember in the opening it didn't work and he had to move on, so he had some difficulties. But in the closing, he started with the map and he said, "If you believe this timeline," and laid it out and said that Richard Allen, is Bridge Guy. And I'm so sorry that I missed the rebuttal after that, saying that Libby always wanted to solve a crime. I'm paraphrasing, and finally she gets to her own.
It was a perfect ending.
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's almost tearful because when you stop and think of the blood-stained tear that was on her cheek, he describes that in his rebuttal.
Well, and I think it was needed because Brad Rosie delivered a very, very effective closing as well.
Oh, I thought Rosie was good. It was good not to go with Baldwin. That opening was all over the place, but his closing was good. All he had to, they never had to come up with that fake Odinist stuff. They really didn't to break the gag order.
No.
All they had to do was poke holes into the investigation. There were mistakes. They're a small town. They never had to go to the Odinist and the lies there.
Susan and Aspen, and Marv, can I ask you guys, can you describe the medieval photos that were shown during Rosie's closing?
I think it was like a sketch. I could hardly see.
Was it?
I don't know.
Well, there were multiple of them. He kind of took them throughout, and Marv might have been able to see better than I. But there were a few pictures that, and they were a little grainy. And so at first I was kind of trying to think, like, well, what are we looking at? And then he's talking about showing these torture devices, and you know, I was like, is he talking about social change now? And I thought it was a very strange thing. But then I talked to people that thought it was very effective. And then he ended with like an image of something. It was a snake, and he basically said, "And this is the state, you know, the state." And I'm like,
that's ironic. It's very. I felt this is good versus evil, and it's ironic. The snake is being pointed as the state.
Right.
I thought so. I thought that was a misstep by the. Kind of confused. I was like, where did this come from?
And how did the jury react to that?
They're just engaged, is all I could say. They never are too shocked or too one way or another. Well, they were when McClellan first, or the blood splatter expert, mentioned the tear. But other than that, I think they're really just top notch. I really will say that. They're engaged. They ask amazing questions. So I don't know what to think.
The only time I saw one of them crack, and it was a lady in the first row, was at a certain point where they were showing the videos of Alan in the prison. She did
because we didn't see
release
that.
a tear, but she got teary-eyed, and she actually went like this to stop herself.
Well, we couldn't see them, but several members of the media could.
I'm wondering what you guys think of that, because it wasn't visual to us. So I'm wondering can two things be right at once? Meaning, yes, he shouldn't have been there. I believe that, and he shouldn't have been treated that way. But it doesn't mean he wasn't there at the bridge that day.
Right. It doesn't negate what he did and what he's being charged with. That's what my point of view is on this. Okay, so they made a mistake by sticking him at Westville. I get why they did it, and it was for his own safety. He had already tried to harm himself.
But there's an argument against it. There is. I mean, you have to admit there's an argument against that being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think there's a definite argument that he shouldn't have been there, but I'm just saying I know why they did do it, why they explained why. They needed to keep him safe to go to trial. And they were, I think they were more concerned about his safety and him harming himself. They needed somebody to watch him 24/7. And in the county, they don't have that many people to do that. They don't have the ability to have that kind of eyes on an inmate like they do.
If I was on the jury, though, I would have an issue with those videos. I'm being honest. If I was on the jury, I'd have an issue with those videos. And does it negate some of his confessions? Maybe. But again, back to the bridge guy and back to what happened that day. it will be interesting to see how the jury broke down and what they focused on, because there is so much to go through.
One of the problems I have with the videos is the way that they were presented. First of all, I took a lot of hate for the video that I did about having to sit in that courtroom for 3 hours that day while the jury watched those videos, and yet Libby and Abby's family had to sit on the other side of the courtroom in complete silence to respect the dignity and the decency, of the defendant. When the week before they had plastered
for those not in court, it was said, Rosie said, so we're just going to show it to the jurors to respect
and I understand that, but,
Richard Allen's dignity.
So I wish that same decency had been shown to Libby and Abby, and I don't think it was. And I'm not blaming the defense. It wasn't their call. And I think
it was.
It
was their call.
It was outrageous.
Very contrived.
Well, and then they spread the videos up kind of like randomly. He'd be, I'm going to advance it 2 minutes. That hadn't been agreed upon between the parties as far as what parts of those videos would be shown to the jury. And so I do feel like it was ironic then when Brad Rosie accused the defense or the prosecution of cherry picking what they let the jury see.
Exactly.
As they were showing those videos. That they let Max Baker actually, up to his discretion as to which videos they showed. I thought that was interesting.
Ridiculous.
And he was contentious, like I'm acting now. He was acting on the stand. It was Max.
Oh, yeah.
Iron Fury said, are you surprised the jury have not reached a verdict yet? Before we started, Kristen said she has been on a jury before. Anybody else been on a jury? They can give some kind of insight into how this all works. No?
I got jury duty, but it was for now. I had to say no.
No,
Ironic.
but I've watched plenty of juries, and over the past 10 years, this whole thing of if the jury comes back quickly, it's guilty, all went out the window 10 years ago. These juries nowadays take their time. They look through every piece of evidence. Each one of their voices is heard several times. The fact that it's only been 14 hours of deliberation does not bother me.
Good point.
And I don't think it's really 14 hours.
I've seen plenty of guilty verdicts where it took 3-4 days to deliberate.
Absolutely. Scott Peterson's jury took 7 days. I think one of the things that we have to separate here, and what the jury's trying to separate, and I'm hoping that they're able to do, is Rick Allen's treatment in prison is separate from what this trial is about. And I'm sorry if people believe that that's not true, but I don't believe that his confessions were caused by psychosis. I feel that this man is acting. He said it himself, his own words. I'm not crazy. I'm only acting crazy. Nobody's
their job is to discredit, Kristen. I know you know this, but I'm just saying their job is to the unspent bullet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's how to explain that away. The confessions, explain that away.
No, I get it.
So every piece of evidence, and we'll see. But I believe that the jury, and exactly what we were discussing earlier, and what Steve said is, no, take everyone else out of this. It doesn't matter if one girl down there said he looked old, one thought he looked young. Who would put themselves there and who would be arrested? I think that's the biggest point, Steve.
I want to say, too, that it was very telling to me that the few days that I was there where the defense was presenting their case, I wasn't there the whole time, but they really didn't attack anything else when I was there other than his mental state in the prison while he was making the confessions.
Yeah.
The first two people that they brought up was Cheyenne, whatever her last name was, and Teresa Liebert. And both of those people, their point of view and their witness testimony was based on time frames that had nothing to do with the crime itself. So right after that, they started going into how he was treated and how terrible Westville was. But I said, if you guys actually have information or proof that your guy is not this person,
why are you going to fixate on that?
Well, right. Like, what else are you going to present? I understand that people on the other side are mad that they didn't get to present the defense that they've had going for the last year. But at the same time,
they tried.
You need to come up with stuff for your client that does not implicate him in the crime. And when I was there, they did not show anything.
And Judge Galt said,
proved it.
Teddy, sorry to interrupt, you could bring in a third party, you just have to have proof. It's not like Judge Galt was like, absolutely no third party.
And Susan, do you remember when Baldwin brought that up at the end, and he tried to once again talk about the third party, and kind of how bewildered he looked at, almost like that,
Well, he's doing a good job as a defense attorney
on the fourth attempt.
Well,
But
somebody
she
said in my member live
absolutely
chat before
said
this,
in there that you have no proof that these individuals were at the area where the crime was committed. Just because somebody said this or somebody said that is not proof.
Right. And she gave them an option to bring that back in if they did present factual proof, which they could not.
Well, this was the very last time they brought it up that she specifically said this. I told you.
It's like
you
Judge Galt
said
Friday the 13th. They keep coming up from the lake. It may come up again. Who knows?
Yeah.
She stated right in court. Yep. Go ahead, Tom.
Somebody said the defense does not have to prove that Richard Allen is innocent, and that's true. However, if the prosecution is saying he's guilty, what did Richard Allen, his wife, and the defense do to find this 2017 phone that would prove that he was home at 2:13?
Oh, I had a question. Isn't there a cloud for that phone, or they had to have the phone?
Depends on what kind of phone he had.
Oh.
It was like a Google phone through Ting service, he said.
Would that be like a fog report information? Did they ever present that?
I'm sure they looked for it, I guess.
Cecil did at the 3-day hearing, but we didn't hear about it at trial.
I was surprised that the prosecution did not bring on, did not focus more on the cell phone stuff.
Hey, I want to bring
this
something
panel
up.
is completely one-sided. You
Teddy,
only
you're
need
up.
opposing
No,
opinions.
Good. I'm gonna be even more one-sided now because I was
continue
really
to be
pissed off
one-sided.
about a
One
couple
thing I
of
gotta
things.
say, I made some great friendships here, so I kid. I miss you, Teddy. You should come
I
back.
truly, I did not, did I ask any of you what your vote would
No.
be before I asked you on?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
I think there were mistakes made by the prosecution throughout the trial. I think there were huge missed opportunities.
There always is,
Absolutely.
no matter what.
Absolutely.
Why do we have to have an opposing view if you feel the way we feel? I see what you mean.
So
you want someone else that believes the defense. I don't know. Teddy, you're up.
Truth is the truth.
So the very first day that I was there was the one day I didn't know how everything worked as far as, you need to sit in a certain spot in the courtroom to be able to see the screen and be able to see the evidence.
Oh,
So
yeah.
the first day, I was in probably the worst possible seat in order to see. And, it sounds really bad because that was the main crime scene day where they had the CSI investigators coming up and explaining how they analyzed the crime scene and all the nuances about it. And that was something that I really wanted to know, like exactly where they were and what the area looked like and how they didn't see the girls right away. And so you're sitting there looking at like the side profile of a flat screen TV, and you've got this guy giving all this really important information. This is the topography, and you can see by this picture that there's a little dip and they're in a valley and yada, yada, yada. So I was sitting there really aggravated just because I had no context to what this guy was saying. But then he comes out and he starts talking about the yellow rope. And it seemed, I can't say this for a fact because I didn't see the photos, but every single photo that he brought up the fact that he would put this yellow rope down to use as a landmark on where they had already searched and where it was safe to walk. Now, we've all read the Franks, and we've all, people were very, I don't want to say smitten with the Franks, but it was the first time that we got any detailed information. Well, exactly. And that's what I was getting to. This is where my bias starts because I was pissed.
Smitten or nauseous? Sorry.
Once I saw all this stuff about this yellow rope that was hanging in all these photos, you think back to the Franks when the defense was trying to put their theory together about how Abby was strung up and, bled out because they couldn't see her blood anywhere in those crime scene photos. So I was pissed just the fact that that yellow rope thing was put in there as some indication to lead people to their conclusion. And then the next week, I don't know what it was about Mondays, but when I drove back out to Indiana, I thought we were all done with stuff with the girls because I was over it at that point. I didn't want to see anything else. Well, then Cicero got up and he started doing the blood spatter analysis.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then I thought back to, oh, in these photos, you can't see Abby's blood everywhere, anywhere. There's nothing. And I go, are you fucking kidding me right now?
You could.
You can definitely see it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's all underneath her. You could see it
Exactly.
leaking towards the back of that
Just-
hoodie.
Yes.
Like, I can't take a lot of what they said for, not even for fact, but I can't even trust that they're trying to do their job when they're
Teddy,
blatantly
that's why I asked
lying.
you earlier, because I know when I first met Teddy, he said, look, I was on the side of the defense coming in here. And he was open-minded. He'd be a great juror. Teddy, you should have shown your face. Come on, you have a likable face.
Maybe
But,
someday. I got to get my makeup done.
he came in here with thinking one way and then thinking the other. So I think that's, that's all we can wish for. None of us here, at least I could speak for the people, most of everyone that I know here, is that why would we want someone who's not guilty to be in prison? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a death penalty case, you guys. Even if the death penalty isn't on the table, it could have been. And we have to remember that this is like the highest type of crime that you can be accused and convicted of and lose your life over. So it's like,
right. We're taking it seriously. Fig, I wanted to ask you something,
Yeah.
Fig. Your name wasn't it on the witness list or something went down? How are you feeling? Are you still, I don't know. How do you feel overall about what you've heard?
Who, me?
Yeah.
The witness list? Yeah, I don't know. It was just, I feel like I know them pretty well, the defense, because I know all the things that they brought up that weren't true and how they try to drag me into it. And so
how do you feel about how it's going? And now that, do you feel like in terms of them deliberating still, what are your thoughts?
Like Marv was saying earlier, me looking up just if that means anything, the length of time it takes to deliberate, there's really nothing either way. So I like the fact that they are being thorough. It's a very important case. Someone's like I think Kristen said, someone's life is at stake here, and I want them to get it right.
And so you're able to not be bitter, not think of yourself in it. You're just moving on. Right?
Yeah, I was watching this case and I wanted to see, I know they don't need to prove reasonable doubt, but from everything I saw, he seemed guilty, but I'm like, all right, prove me wrong. That's fine. I'll be wrong. And I just didn't find anything compelling that showed that without a reasonable doubt, he was guilty. And if they showed that he was elsewhere, if he was on his phone during the time of the murders, if he like went to McDonald's and purchased something, if he was on camera, I was looking for that. And I would say, yep, I was wrong, but none of that, nothing.
But none of that
convinced me
came.
otherwise.
Yeah, you're right. And none of that came. We were
Why
all
is there
waiting
so much
for
anger?
something like
You're
that.
right. Why is there so much anger though towards someone who feels like I do? I guess it feels like there's anger. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think there is. I
There
think
is.
followed
There
this case for so long that they've, feel like they're a part of it. I know from watching this case and being involved in investigating, researching, or presenting information based on it for the entire time. I feel like it's a part of me. Like when this is over, I know that I'll carry those girls in my heart for a long, long time. So I think that whether you're on either side,
Good point.
there's that feeling that, you've been so involved that you're committed to it.
Yeah.
The comment that you've got at the bottom of the screen there, Tom, I sent you an audio comparison. I don't know if you want to listen to it and use it or not, but it's when he was on the Skyline. There's a bug in here. Skyline or whatever that thing is called, ski lift. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That compares that to the actual video where he says down the hill. So I think it's a pretty good comparison.
I don't have that link right now. I just want to say we're at an hour and 23 minutes. We'll go for maybe another half hour. So Purple Amarillo says, do you think
Gotta get my charger. Sorry.
Right. Do you think the voice is from the guy in the video? So when I was in court, they played the 43-second video 4 times. The first time I was on the left side behind the TV, so I only heard it. The thing that stood out to me was the guy's part sounded far away. I did not hear down the hill. Then times 2 through 4, some of them were enhanced. So yes, I do think it's the guy from the video. I don't think it was a fake video. Anybody else who listened to it have any thoughts?
I had one thing that I wanted to say earlier, but it didn't really fit in with what we were talking about. The first time that I heard the video, I was one row from the very last row. So the second row in, if you want to call it that. I heard guys down the hill. And then when they played the original version again, I was in the same seat, but one row behind. And at that point, I could only hear guys. I couldn't hear down the hill just based off the video. So if that tells you, how hard it is to hear some of this stuff, that's all the difference it takes is one row in that courtroom. But, and this is something that I actually said this to Tom, and I wanted to give Libby a lot more credit than I think is being played off, because even McClelland's, closing statement, how, she wanted to solve crimes and she did. I turned around to Tom and I was like, that's one brave effing girl for doing what she did, how she did it. And Tom goes, well, yeah, but this is what she wanted to do. Like, she had that knowledge in the back of her head. I go, I don't care. They were like, as a grown man, that video was like a horror movie. It was terrifying. You can only imagine how they felt. And she still did that without, she wasn't thinking about it. She was just like, this is really sketchy. Let me do what I need to do. And yeah.
She was smart.
And
Steve,
Teddy,
did you want to say something, Steve?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Turbo.
Turbo, you can go, and then Steve has a comment.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say to that point that Libby was filming in the vertical position, and it wasn't until she switched to the horizontal position that we were able to see Bridge Guy. And that was very jarring to me, because she not only recorded them, you couldn't, in the first unedited version, it was like I was on the family side, so I didn't see the TV. They had it angled, so I really didn't see much. But I do know that everybody was saying that they almost couldn't see Bridge Guy in the unedited version. If it was zoomed out or whatever. But I definitely did get to see that video several times, and her turning her phone to landscape and capturing him at the end. It was just like, oh my God.
Fear, right.
And listening to Abby say, don't leave me up here. Don't leave me up here.
Their
I mean, my God.
Girls.
My God.
When
Steve,
they
you had a
say,
comment?
when you hear.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay.
Sorry, Turbo.
Not trying to change the subject too much here, but going back to my law enforcement interests and CSI, crime scene analysis, everything that we learned from this trial, one of the biggest things we now understand is what can be extracted from these phones. And we also have to say, what is the one phone that is missing that could absolutely be compared to the phone of Libby's? What happened to Richard Allen's phone? What could we learn from the same extraction, the same analysis of what would parallel? Do we have those 20-foot differences during certain times? Do we have that positioning? Do we have images taken? Do we have stock markets being analyzed? What do we have? Do we have images of the crime scene taken? We don't know what is on that phone. And of all the phones that he had that was taken from his residence, the one phone that would absolutely, that if he's not BG and he's not the one that committed this crime, the phone would not parallel if they could do a similar extraction and do a comparative value. And so for that, we have to look at of the one thing that we're missing here from the unluckiest man in the world.
Steve, I just want to follow up with this. Libby said, you've done a lot of tests on your channel since you're a former law enforcement. Do you think Richard Allen could have done this by himself?
I've always qualified that if there was another crime scene of where the girls had to be transported to that scene and by an individual, absolutely not. But being on the plateau, if Abby and Libby were able to get to that location under their own power, absolutely, Lone Wolf could do it. But if he was having to be carried across the creek, up the embankment, no. But if that is And from everything that we see from the CSI expert that testified about the blood spatter, that those injuries occurred there. And we had those transfers on the F tree. When you look at that, this is where it occurred. And they were able to be under their own power for the fact that even after suffering these injuries, Libby was able, under her own power, to transition several feet through that and create certain blood pools and transfers, and until she succumbed to her injuries. So
Right.
that location is the crime scene of where she was found.
Just to follow up there, Steve, what you were quoting Cicero, I did have one quote that he gave about, the F, as we call it, the F tree, and he said that the best explanation for the blood that was on that F tree is that this is where the bloodletting occurred. And he did give very specific testimony, and not the same testimony as that we previously heard at the 3-day hearings. So it did get into very specific.
Because for if you had defensive injuries, you could have that type of blood transfers over extended areas. But if you do not have any defensive injuries, such as none to the hands, then we have to have a significant major injury of where someone would touch that injury and then lean up to something as they move through that crime scene. And for that type of transfer to occur, yes, you are looking at absolutely horrendous injury and blood loss that occurred in a very, and those blood patterns would also be seen on the victim. And so, I mean, that's not anything anyone should ever witness and I feel so bad for the juries and those in the courtroom that had to see that for the fact you'll live with that forever.
But it tells a story. I was in the front row that day, Steve, and it's horrible to hear, but it fills in the blanks of, based on his expertise, kind of what happened. And as horrific as it is, it kind of lays the story out.
Yeah. The painting of the upside down L or the F tree, you're having to look at a tremendous amount of transfer that occurred. I mean, from here instantly over for it to have occurred that way to create that type of transfer and a passive flow.
One thing that I observed during Major Cicero's testimony on day 9 was the male jurors reacted the most to his testimony. And I had and that was actually the day that I call her juror number 11, which she didn't express much emotion at all during the trial.
Which one? Front row?
Front row, right beside the fellow with the receding hairline, J12. She was sat right beside him in the second row.
Silver-haired lady.
Yes, the silver. Yes, so she's in her 60s, and her and him, both J11 and J12, both had their head in their hands at the same time during Cicero's testimony, and also he kept J12. He kept he's the older fella. He was very emotive throughout trial, but specifically during Cicero's testimony, him and juror number 6, who was right above him, the fellow that took all the notes with the glasses, he was in his thirds. They kept going back and forth, looking at the screen and not being able to look, and they had their head in their hands. But juror number 11, who did not express very much at all the whole trial, she was very upset that day as well. So just, there was a lot of reaction, but I did note that overall during the graphic images that were displayed during trial while I was there, that I observed the men on the jury, which was kind of surprising to me because I didn't see a lot of reaction emotionally from the women during the graphic images, but I did definitely notice the men.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's just my observation.
Anyone that has looked at those crime scene photos and saw the blood, the amount of blood around the base of that tree and on that tree and in the leaves and in different places around the crime scene. You try to tell me that crime did not happen in that place, they can go F off.
Yep. I completely agree.
And by the description of when they picked up the leaves and sticks in that area, the ground was saturated.
You cannot look at those pictures and not understand the amount about the brutality of that scene. It was done there and nowhere else.
I want to just say real quick, Rogan Gonzo's in here. Hey, Gonzo. Hi, babe. One of the things he said is may have been the phone. Carter was flying over the river outside of Peru 2 weeks before his arrest, and his mom lived close. People always thought that was a Klein search of the river, and he said, nah. I tend to agree with him. I think that they may have been out there searching for Richard Allen's phone in the Wabash.
Could be.
Maybe.
Well, they were searching there because Kagan said his dad drove to the cemetery, and on the way back, they threw a phone and knife or something.
Well, I think Kagan said that, but I think that we are just assuming that's why they were searching that river. I still say they.
I believe they didn't come back across him until September 21st, which is when Kathy Shank, who she's the hero of this case. The woman is barely 5 foot tall, and she's a force. I have so much respect for that woman.
She did so much after being retired, come out of retirement, spent 2 years of her life putting all of that into a computer.
Yeah, I'm a Kathy Shank fan.
Yep, and she still is. She's still volunteering her time every day.
Sorry, I'm coming up to the bottom panel. I just want to highlight some comments for people who say Rick is not guilty. I'm looking for comments. So write NG and then why you think Rick is not guilty. We'll put it on the screen. So this person, Shelley, says, the fact that Kathy Allen in the October 26, 2022 interrogation, when it's just her and Rick in the room, said to Rick that you told me you wasn't on the bridge that day in Holman's office makes me think she questioned if it was him or not. So my notes, when that happened, I wrote, Kathy said, witness said it was you there. How they know it was you? Were you on bridge? So did Richard Allen tell her he was on the trails, but never told her that he was on the bridge? Or if she said, is that you in that photo? Did he say, no, I was just on the trail, never on the bridge? Which I don't know that we'll ever get the answer.
I don't think he said he was there wrong. But
he said specifically to her when she was talking, I didn't get her, asking him that because she was questioning whether it was him or not. She was so emotional. You could hardly hear what she was saying, but it almost sounded like she was a little pissed off at him because she's like, you told me you were on the trail, but you never told me you were on the bridge. And he goes, yeah, I was on that first trestle like that. I said that. And she's like, no, you didn't. Like, you only told me that you were on the trail that day. So
that's
it
what
was
I
like
got out of it too.
Yeah, they like unloaded on her in the other room. Like, hey, we believe that this is your husband, whatever they said to her. And she came in, she was very upset and she was very confused. She didn't know what to think.
Remember, even when he gave the tip to Doolin, he didn't want to meet at his house. He was very specific about the fact that he didn't want them coming to his house. He didn't
or looking at his phone.
He didn't want to go to. He didn't want to go.
What I missed? Can we start over?
Law enforcement. So he met. That's why they met at the Save a Lot parking lot. I mean,
well, to be fair, if he was driving to town to go to the grocery store when he got that call, he could have just said, "I'm on my way there." It's not necessarily true that he did not want to meet at home.
My phone died. Sorry.
I agree with Tom on that one.
Sorry. All right, we have about 20 more minutes, and I appreciate all of you spending your Sunday afternoons. 20 more minutes of comments. Looking for some stuff opposing views, but not seeing many facts.
They all left. Okay.
I'm just thinking it's nerve-wracking for me. I can't imagine what the family's going through, but I wonder if it does come back tomorrow, and if it doesn't, I'm curious when it does.
Yeah.
Brandon, I know her last name is Shank. I called her Shankmeister because she's awesome.
Well, I have a question for everyone. So, I mean, we all know what we would vote. Like, I mean, what is everyone's opinion as far as the jury and
maybe the 4 counts, like what you're saying, what they can vote?
Right. Like, like what, I mean, so, I mean, like, if, like, what do you think this jury is more likely to do? Like, are any of you concerned about a hung jury, or do we all think that they might come to a conclusive decision?
Steve,
I think that they could very possibly come back and just say that he is guilty of kidnapping that resulted in a murder because of the fact that there are questions in their mind about DNA at the evidence site.
It's a good point.
Mhm.
Steve, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh, no, I was just, on what Aspen was saying there, that was a good, that today has given me more hope as far as at least 5 of y'all have been to the trial. You've seen the interactions of the attorneys and the jury reacting to the testimony, both sides. That up until today, while I believe that Richard Allen is responsible, I always thought that more than likely we would be in a situation, not this week, but probably next week, that if it goes next week, then I'll be fearful of a hung jury. And I'm still fearful of a hung jury for the fact that the state had flaws.
Mm-hmm.
Investigations have flaws. That happens. It's chaos. We should do better. We should strive to be better. And we will be better as we move forward. But with hearing the individuals here testifying or speaking of being there during testimony has given me hope that there absolutely will be a guilty verdict if the jury sides with what y'all saw within the courtroom. And but otherwise, I was going to vote hung jury.
I'm glad we gave you hope. I can comment on this comment, Tom, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Please do.
that was talked about. And can you clarify?
Well, so his daughter testified because apparently in one of the confessions, he said, I'm sorry, to the effect of, I'm sorry for molesting my daughter. And his sister came up and testified. So his sister came up and they asked her 3 questions. Is this your brother? Yes. A couple questions. Did he molest you? No. Do you love your brother? Yes. Would you lie for him? No. And then she walked off. Then his daughter came up. And I noticed that Richard Allen's wife wasn't in court at that particular time. And then there was a sidebar. I felt so bad for the daughter. She's up there. Same question. Did your father molest you? No. Do you love your father? Yes. Would you lie for him? No. And there were sidebars and objections. And she was there and her eyes were tearing up and her eye line never went to her father. I mean, ever.
One time.
And I bet that the jury picked up on that. Even if it was a quick glance, your eyes are tearing up. You could tell, obviously, clearly, no one wants to be up there. You'd rather be anywhere but there. But to me, if I was on the jury, knew what they knew about the case, not much going in, I would say, there was something there that said she's testifying but doesn't want to be here. And the fact that Kathy Allen wasn't in there, there's obviously some strife. What you make of it is up to you. But I thought the prosecution did something brilliant. They were not able to get pictures of Bridge Guy 2017 into evidence because Rosie, the defense, said, no, these are not timestamped. Well, it was in the cross where he said, it was, look at this picture. Is that your father? Yes. Is this your father? Yes. Is this your father? Is this your father? 4 pictures of the way her father looked around that time. They didn't need a timestamp and they got it in anyway. Why is this key? Because no one knows the case like all of us in terms of the jurors, if they're being honest. So if you think that Bridge Guy is the guy sitting in that courtroom who's shriveled up, who keeps getting smaller and smaller by design,
exactly,
you can't put him on the bridge.
Right. And you know, right behind that though, I felt like there was a missed opportunity by the prosecution to use that opportunity to ask Brittany, have you ever seen your dad lose his temper?
That's a risk. That's a risk. I would never say that about my father on the stand in front of news people. I would never say it. And that's a risk. And if she says no, you're in trouble.
For those who were there, did they say like, well, bring up the point, the prosecution bring up the point, what to Brittany, like, well, what if he molested you when you're too young to remember?
No.
Or when you were sleeping. Maybe you were sleeping and you don't know.
It's very hard to prove that. It's very hard to prove that. And so, even if she has that in the back of her mind, I'm not even sure if it's true. I'm just saying that from his. If that's true, do you think she's going to say it for the first time in front of us, news people?
No.
I think
and I'll say this in response to that. My mother was essayed by her father. In fact, all 5 of her sisters were. My mother blocked it out, and she did not recall it until she was in her 60s, and she was getting psychotherapy. And I'm here to tell you, it was horrific when it all finally flooded to her to her forefront of her mind of what was done to her as a small child. And just so you know, yeah, it's, you know, if it happened, she may not remember, or she
and
may
let's say it did happen, it doesn't make him the murderer. So
Exactly.
now the defense can go
Absolutely.
off at a tangent and saying, just because you think he did this doesn't mean he did this. It muddies it even more so than it is.
Exactly.
High criminality. So Cryptex, like I said, I did not ask any of these people their verdict before I asked them to be on. I've been saying to write in the comments NG.
You have a lot of fans that don't like us.
I've been saying for people to like.
Are you the mole? Are you the? I'm kidding.
Oh my God. So if you think he's not guilty, write NG and
I
why.
thought it was Teddy. What am I missing? Sorry, Tom.
It's okay. So criminality. You see Richard Allen trying to manipulate Kathy in the October 26th Holman interview, like was suggested in closing arguments. He definitely stood up. He's like, baby, this, trying to kiss her.
He's like, I know you know that I didn't do this. I know you know I didn't do this. Let her speak.
Yep. Yep.
I don't know if I would call it manipulation, but he definitely was like, baby, this, kissing her, like trying to.
Total manipulator.
One of the phone calls that he made
it was
to
Kerr's
her.
words that he was manipulating, and the fact that, you know, I wouldn't do this, you know, I couldn't do this, I care what people think, blah blah blah. Yeah.
In one of those phone calls, he asked her, he's like, "You're not going to do anything to yourself, are you?"
Yeah.
And she said, "No, I would never do that." And he goes, "I think I might have to kill myself now."
Right.
Like I'm not
right.
drawing conclusions from that, but that seems pretty manipulative if you're gonna pick her brain on how she's feeling and her mental health and stuff, and then after you get a no from her, you turn around and say, "Well, I'm probably gonna have to kill myself." And then she freaked out because she was, you know, obviously you would be upset in the first few days that you're talking to your husband in jail, but I thought that was a very strange little conversation they had, and was like, oh.
Well, especially after you had to call 911 in 2015 in January, you know, because he had a gun to his head, threatening to kill himself at that point drunk.
But none of it
matters.
matters.
I do think he was
when
much
it comes
more
down to the day, right? I mean, I guess it builds on character, but the defense would run with that stuff.
Don't you guys think it's odd that the prosecution didn't talk about Richard Allen's character and anything about him prior to this? They didn't bring up what he was like at work. What was he like in real life? Didn't have, you know, there was nothing. And even the defense didn't. They didn't put on any witnesses to talk about who this man is. They basically made him an enigma sitting at that defense table.
A woman came up to me yesterday as I was out there outside of the courthouse, and she came up to me and she hugged me and she said, "I used to work with Richard Allen at Walmart." And I said, "What was he like?" And it's just a really nice woman. And she just said, "A little creepy. He would stare at you. He's really mean." And I'm not saying mean makes you a murderer by any means, but she just said it was interesting. He said he would glare at women, and he didn't want them working in the gun department. He was always adamant about that. But then if they were on a ladder, he would all of a sudden come forward. She just said he was creepy. And I'm not saying it makes it a murder, but she came up to me and she knew him well for years. And I said, "Did he quit?" And she said he was just all of a sudden gone one day.
Susan, I met her at CBS.
And she said he was
so
quick
funny.
to anger.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. I have a
could
question
see the
for
defense
everyone.
spinning that. Go ahead, Fig. Sorry.
Yeah, it's real important. Just so we don't bring the same thing, what dishes are you guys bringing to Auntie Fran's Thanksgiving dinner? I don't want to. Can we just figure that out now? Is that cool?
I know Auntie Fran does not want us at Thanksgiving dinner.
Mince.
I'm sorry, there will be no food or water. There will be no food or water at
Sorry, I don't cook.
I'm going to bring my sleeping
We're not
bag and
allowed
my
to
pillow.
eat or drink.
I'm
Sorry.
bringing the mashed potatoes.
If we tap you on your shoulder, you
Quick
must
steps
leave.
in the hall.
Fig, I would feel sorry for you if you tried to go to Auntie Gold's for Thanksgiving. She hates us all.
And wait, so if those of you not in the trial are confused, she was so mean during the trial. We could not say a word. We could not eat. We could not take a sip of water. If you moved wrong or had a whisper out of your mouth, you're tapped on the shoulder and you're eggs. But I will say I respect her. I think she ran this well, considering the circus out front. Good for her. There was no turtle boys inside there.
So Dolly said, "Why
Can
did
I
Dan
just
do
say?"
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead,
Turbo.
I was just going to say, during the 3 hours of my final day in court on Saturday, day 14, where we watched the jury watch the videos.
Mm.
I, after about hour number 2, tried to unwrap a tiny little candy in my bag, and I swear it was like a little whisper of a noise. And as I said, "Shh, that was really loud."
I had a
I was
nightmare
like,
about it.
"What?"
I had a nightmare about
Because
Frank
that
Gall,
you
not
could
to-
hear, you could hear a pin drop for hours that day. It was like, oh my God, like I'm gonna pass out. I need something. And
You know
it
how bad
wasn't
it
loud. I
was.
didn't think it was loud.
Teddy, go
You know
on.
you know how bad it was when everybody had a heart attack when Richard Allen's cell phone went off in that video, and you saw everybody lose a couple
Yes.
years off their lives.
Yes,
Thinking it
because you're
was
like,
theirs.
if it was us, we're all in Cass County, all of us.
We have about 10 more minutes left, and I'll let all of you guys go.
We're
Aspen,
joking because
Threatening the
it's like an
guards.
experience you experienced together.
Aspen, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah.
No, I just want to say, one thing I think that it is important to remember, with this jury, is as educated as they are, and they're very intelligent and they're very engaged. There's so many things about this case that we all know that, that they don't, and that did not come into this trial. I mean, and an example for me of that was one of the juror questions when they were talking. I can't remember the witness, but one of the juror questions was, I think it might have been Betsy Blair. They said, could the car you saw outside of the CPS building not have been an employee that was at work inside? The jury was not aware that the CPS building had been an abandoned building.
Mhm.
So like they're sitting here perceiving a working business that he parked at.
Right.
And
I think
that
it's a
that
mistake. They weren't able to see the bridge. There's nothing like seeing it in person. The prosecution said no.
Mhm.
And I think if you see it, I think that benefits the prosecution. I don't know why they didn't want. I'm not saying
It's different than what it was in 2017, and I think that's why they didn't want them to see
the
it.
same, Kristen, that you
I
could
know.
see the other side. I don't know.
But
But
I
they
think it
made
was
some excellent calls.
it was the terrain.
state. Mhm.
And I think it was dangerous.
At the end of the day, we've had 7 years to obsess over this stuff, and I think that that's going to be one of the deciding factors on whatever conclusion they come to. There's a lot of information that wasn't presented on both sides that we've all seen and heard, and it definitely influences our opinion on the case. But it's a lot of information. Even the days that I was there, that I knew a lot of the background to it, it was a lot to take in and a lot to try to piece together in the format that the prosecution laid out and what the defense laid out as far as their rebuttal. I mean, these people, I'm really happy that they're taking their time, even though it's making everybody else freak out. But
I think this is worth mentioning. Teddy, tell everyone what you do for a living. I find it fascinating, and I'm so grateful that I've met all of you, because meeting Teddy, he doesn't do this for a living. He came here, he had smart opinions, just a cool guy that I liked hanging out with, all of you guys. So I think it's worth mentioning that even though there's a lot of vitriol, and at the end of the day, this is about heartbroken, heart-wrenching stories and families that we love. But it was good. There was a good side to this, of meeting you guys.
Yes.
Mhm.
Teddy,
Teddy,
what do you
you
do for a
wanna review
living?
where you
Take it away.
How long you been stripping, Teddy?
well, I was just gonna say I chill in my mom's basement all day. I grift for spare change on my.
See, he's funny. He
Or-
kept it
Liar.
light. After rough
You're
days
a
in
liar.
court, you guys kept it light. I mean, you kept it, I guess, made it okay.
Real.
I'm ready for a lobby drink.
So
Teddy,
I'll
are you
do-
sure you're not Delphi dummies?
I'll do 5 more comments, then we'll wrap it up.
I'm
So Dolly
Delphi
says-
dummies.
We're like, wait, we're either the Goonies or Bad News Bears. You guys pick.
Goonies.
Why
Did
did
you
Dan
hear
do
the
it?
Canadian
Goonies.
accent?
The
I'm gonna
Goonies.
mute all of you and kick you out, so it's just the Tom show going forward.
You'll be so lonely.
Why did Dan Doolin not realize Richard Allen's bridge guy when he talked to him on February 18th? So Rick had a
He's
short
not
haircut.
a Rhodes Scholar. Back to you. No, I'm sorry.
I'm sure Rick showed up with his shaved head or whatever, not shaved head, but bridge guy does not look like he has a shaved head. So
And
I
I'm
think that's
joking
part of the
about
reason.
Dan Doolin. The town being so small, monsters that you think that would do this to Abby and Libby, seeing the crime scene photos, listening to Cicero testify about blood splatter. You don't think that a man who's married to his high school sweetheart, who walked his daughter down the aisle, could do this, and you think they look a specific way. So if he came up to me and said, hey, I was down there, I didn't really see anyone, you're not going to think murderer, right? That's the only explanation I would have.
Let's also not forget that Dan Doolin was on vacation and came back and got this case kind of thrust upon him. And you're not going to point at every single person you talk to and say, hey, this is probably the guy.
Absolutely. He did the best he could, right.
Right. I mean, even the people that knew Richard Allen, they didn't necessarily point him out as bridge guy right away or ever, because there are some people that still like to go out in public with masks on their face and face coverings and stuff. But for the most part, you just don't analyze somebody and think, well, if they had half their face covered.
And it was not Dan Doolin's fault, actually, that the tip got mislabeled. It was dispatch. They clarified that in court.
That's what they all say. I'm kidding.
And everybody's out there looking for a monster. And guess what, guys? The monster lives next door.
Developing children's birthday pictures.
He develops your photos, and he sits in his driveway and drinks beer after
Are we
work
aging ourselves?
and
Thank
smokes
God he's not.
cigarettes.
Oh, I guess you're talking about Anna.
And I'm just saying, the monster is among us. It's not a monster at all. It's not the boogeyman. It's just a guy.
And that's
a guy
why we shouldn't
who
blame
has
his
secrets.
wife to
a
know.
guy who has secrets.
Right. He was hiding in plain sight, as the superintendent always said. And the superintendent said, and I disagreed at the time, but it turns out to be true, if it is Richard Allen, saying, what will those closest to you think of when they find out what you did to 2 little girls? And in my mind, I was there in 2019. I thought, nothing. Anyone capable of this doesn't care. And then when he sees Kathy Allen in those interviews in October 2022, which I think are the most crushing evidence against him, he said to his wife, I care what people think. I care what people think. So
I didn't say he was a monster purple amaryllis. I said that when he locked eyes with me, it was extremely unnerving. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He looked right through me.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
Yeah, he had a tendency to do that. The day that I was in court, I noticed
everybody
around did the same thing and just stared right into you. And that made me wonder, how often was he watching YouTube and watching all of us? And the reason he stared is because he had that instant where he recognized us from something he had watched.
I agree.
And what perspective did the jury have that we couldn't see?
Anything to highlight?
I'm sorry, Aspen, what did you say?
And what perspective of that did the jury have that we couldn't see? Because he was facing them pretty much the whole time. So I wonder what their perception of that was.
But I've never seen a defendant in a courtroom sit and swivel in his chair like he did, back and forth. And every single time there was a break in the case, the day I was in there, of any kind, whether it be a sidebar or if we got, just a break, he would turn around and stare at the gallery constantly, or he would stand up and turn his back and stare at the gallery, looking at everybody.
Yeah.
I mean,
some people have said that
weird.
because he's alone in a cell, that he's just getting out to actually interact with a lot of people. So that's like a natural thing to just like try and take it all in.
Who said that? That's a little weird.
Random people, like if he's in his jail cell or a prison cell by himself so often.
No, Scott Peter, I think of Deborah. I mean, maybe. I'm not saying it's wrong.
I'm just saying Scott Peterson didn't get up and stand in court and turn around and look at everybody. Let me just say,
I'm trying to be nice. It's odd. It's wrong. It's weird. He stares through Tara. He stares at the family members. The attorney should say, hey, look at me. I was in there that day with Nancy Grace, and she said, why is he, I'll stare right through him. She was ready to go to blows. But she just said, I would tell my client, turn around. Don't do it. But
Steve, do you want to answer this question?
Oh, sorry. There was one point when the day that I was in court that it was in a break and he stood up, and at first he was just stretching back and forth like this, and then he started doing like a little dance. And I leaned over to Frosty. I was sitting by Thomas Frosty, and I said, what is he doing? And a couple people behind me started laughing because they saw it too. They were like, what the heck? So
and he would always look, good point, at Kathy, looking at his wife to make sure she's looking at him. It was just, it's strange to see. And you're in there all day and you can't say a word. So you're looking at the jury, you're looking at Richard Allen.
The most interesting interaction I saw.
What, Tom?
The most interesting interaction I saw was during an afternoon break where most people would leave.
Yeah.
And I was one of the few people who did not. And it was the day that it was revealed that Richard Allen said something like, I would never cheat again. And during the break, everybody left almost. And then his wife was standing in the second row. And he comes walking in through the door and he's smiling at her as he's walking. And I looked down to right, he's smiling at her.
Yeah.
I looked up and he's scowling at her and she's still looking straight forward. So I'm not saying anything other than that was just what I observed. I don't know what she was thinking. What's that?
What did he say? I missed it. Sorry.
He didn't say. He was smiling as he entered the courtroom and he looked at his wife, Kathy, during the break. I wrote down on my notes, he was smiling at his wife, Kathy. When I looked up, he was at the defense table and he's now scowling instead of smiling, looking at his wife, and she is still looking straight ahead, not with her head turned.
Marv, the day that I sat there with you and he kept looking over at Bob Mata and
my
Kathy,
goodness, yes.
what was his looks like?
Okay, so every time Bob Mata would talk to Kathy, Richard Allen would get mad. But if he leaned over the person that was in the middle of them to touch her or get closer, you could see him really get mad. You could see, it was.
I wonder if the jury sees what we saw. I wonder. It'll be interesting.
Steve, can you answer this question from Anne? What does panel think about the spent bullet evidence? Did defense successfully rebut?
There's a lot of variables about any type of analysis. Was it done what I would consider apple to apples? No, I wasn't happy with the testimony of fully explaining why this has to occur. That even bullets are manufactured, that every bullet unfired, unspent, there's variables within those as far as the size of the casing of the unspent round. And could they have went in there and tried to determine through just the manufacturing process, is this bullet from the same lot number of other bullets that are within Richard Allen's home? Evidently, they were unable to do that, but through the functioning of the gun and are there processes that could have been followed that would have answered and all the questions about how the spent round could have been compared fairly rather than shooting? Yes, there's processes out there. Once again, that's a failure on the state's experts to not follow those protocols and procedures that could have created the same markings of an unspent round. So I'm not happy with that. And it opened up and allowed the defense to make that argument. And I think that that is a good argument. It is the apple, the oranges. That's something that will stick with the jury. And so once again, we look at experts that
that kind of counteract. And Steve, I had a question because my dad, and it depends on your thought process, and he's an attorney, and he'll call me and say, is there a verdict yet? What's going on? And to him, the slam dunk was the bullet. And that the unspent bullet, he's like, well, the unspent bullet, that's it. And that's his experience. That's what he knows. But I said, Dad, they're not going to do that. It was the expert. They're not going to get that. So it almost has to be. And even if you excuse away the admissions because of the prison, I think what you can't excuse away when it comes down to it is him putting himself at the bridge and the timeline and laying it out and Libby's phone, what was on her phone.
Yeah. The expert witness that Richard Allen became, that of everything that he's tested. I mean, there's no better witness for the state than they had of being able to walk the jury through that, through the words and through the eyes and through the actions of Richard Allen's. He's the one that's responsible.
Yep.
Excellent point.
All right, so we're past 2 hours. I appreciate everybody spending time. I know it's getting to be dinner time, so I'm going to wrap it up. I did not ask these people what their verdict was going to be. I know people are complaining that there's no
Don't be mad at Tom. Don't be mad at Tom.
Yeah, don't be mad at Tom.
No, and I mean, if we heard the evidence in court that I thought pointed towards his innocence, I would be shouting it through the rooftop.
Right.
I showed up in Delphi with an open mind, and even during Bree and Rayleigh's testimony describing a guy who's taller or muscular, I was thinking, is Richard Allen truly innocent? And then I found out from Betsy Blair that she was actually there 12:02 to 1:15, never mentioned seeing Rick's car at 1:15. All this stuff, it just adds up to Rick's noon to 1:30 timeline does not add up. So,
and none of our opinions matter, right? It's really just those 12 people.
Right.
I want to say this, that I was on the fence until Tom last week said that Richard Allen was responsible.
He's kidding. He's kidding.
Any final comments from anybody?
That's impressive.
Steve, do you have any final comments?
No, I just, like I said, we have to let our court system work, and it is working. I thought there was going to be a mistrial. If you looked at the circus that came pre-trial, I think everything through the court system has worked its way out. We've seen failures by both the prosecution and the defense, the state, everything that you can imagine going on in this trial. I think justice will be found, and we'll have to, whatever the jury comes forth, we have to honor that and let the system work.
Deb, any final comments?
Yeah, I guess mine is from the human side of it. And I just, whatever the outcome is, I just hope that everyone will behave and treat each other with kindness and compassion. And remember both sides of the families, because there's hurt on both sides. And we have to accept whatever the outcome is.
Kristen, final comment.
I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me. This was an amazing couple of hours to get to spend time with each and every one of you. I love each and every one of you. I respect you. You guys have all done outstanding work on this case. And it's heartbreaking for all of us to have to sit here and wait for a verdict. But this is how it works in our country, in the justice system. I do think that they will find a verdict. I think they will come to a verdict. I don't think Judge Gull will allow them to hastily come back and say that they are deadlocked or whatever. She'll make them go back and look at things. So I think we'll get a verdict. And I too would like to say this case is not about any of us. It's not about our YouTube channels, our personas. It's not about anything but Abby and Libby and justice. And when I was able to meet Carrie for the first time that Saturday that you guys walked out of that courthouse after her not being able to see those videos of Richard Allen, but knowing what her daughter had been plastered all over that 85-foot screen or whatever, I'm telling you the pain in that poor mother's eyes and hugging her, it was gut-wrenching for me. And I just want to send all my love to them.
Thank you. Aspen, any final comments?
I have hope that the jury can come to a comprehensive decision. I believe they will. I have faith in the jury. I have a ton of empathy for everybody that's been affected by this, whether it be Kathy Allen, Brittany Allen, Janice, whether it be the town of Delphi, but most of all, the families of Libby and Abby. I don't know if I believe in justice per se, but I do think that this process is I think that closing this chapter is a very important point for them to be able to move on to see what the next chapter of their grieving looks like. And I don't think they can do that until this chapter concludes. And so for that reason alone, I pray that these families get some answers.
Yeah, agreed. Turbo, final comment?
Thanks for having me tonight, Tom. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk with everyone here and have intelligent conversation. It's been most enjoyable. I hope your audience, for the most part, has enjoyed our discussion. And I do want to say justice for Libby and Abby. And I am thinking of their families tonight, the community of Delphi, which has been just gracious and lovely. I had wonderful experiences there both times I was there, and I also wish for them to heal, not just the online community that we've all followed along in various degrees all these years, but certainly the community, and hopefully we'll get a verdict soon. It'll be the right one that the jury themselves have confidence in, and have no regrets, and that they know that they've made the right decision, whatever that may be.
Marv, final comment?
I keep thinking, we want a verdict so bad and we want it to be the right verdict. We want the right person caught. But in the end, no one wins. We don't win. They don't win. The families don't win. The community don't win. No one wins. It's 2, 3, 4 families. It's the girls' families and Richard Allen's families that suffer the most in all of this. Okay.
Right.
And I include Richard Allen's family in that because they do. And I'm just hoping that there can be a little bit of closure for the girl's family if he is found to be guilty, so that they can move on and they can focus on the legacy of the girls and not just feel the hurt all the time, and remember the good times they had with their girls.
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Thank you.
Because we've sat there and we've watched the pain on their faces and the tears roll down their faces. And we don't want
and to
that
have them
anymore.
and just have them walk up to you and hug you and say,
Yes.
thank you for being here. We need your voice.
Yes. So, that is my hope. That is my wish. And that after this is all done and over with, we can come together again and make sure that Abby and Libby's legacy always lives on, that they're always remembered and not forgotten.
Absolutely.
Susan, final comment?
Okay, I wrote a short speech.
That's okay.
Just kidding. Okay, so I digress. But Paul Holes told me this years ago. He said, Susan, the judicial system is not friendly to the families. And it stuck with me. Little did I know, just saying everything that can go on and with the defense and what have you. But exactly what most of you have said about the families. But being in that courtroom, I'm in awe about how those families were there every single day and have to listen to the cross-examination and everything that goes on throughout this long process. And I was able to meet one of Libby's friends, and I said, what do you think she would think of all this? I just happened to meet her randomly in Lafayette. And she said, can I go with you? So yesterday we were there thinking there'd be a verdict. And I said, what do you think Libby would think of all of this? And she said, I think she'd want everyone to be happy. That's who she was. Gregarious, fun, always laughing. She would want people to, after this, move on, to not live in that anger, no matter what the outcome. So I'm just grateful all around. I truly am. Yes, I have been in this hotel room for 28 days. Yes, I have had some ups and downs, and a little bit. There's some. It's tough, but nothing. Tara's laughing. She knows. We're now BFFs, but it's nothing compared to what the family's gone through, and I'm grateful. I'm able to witness it and be part of it, and the friends I've met throughout, and of course the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Vic, Salz, and Teddy had to jump off, so I want to thank them for spending time. All of you, thank you for sharing your time and your thoughts.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
For anybody who got upset that there wasn't enough not guilty comments, I was looking in the comments trying to highlight stuff. I didn't see a lot. So if you want to write under the video what you think points to Rick being not guilty, I'll gladly reply.
Tom, you're the most fair person I've ever met, and your notes are on point. There should be an award for your note taking.
Thank you.
Or, no, what do
pages.
you call it? What did you send all of us? That would have taken me like 2 years
PowerPoint?
to write all that.
PowerPoint.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Good night, everybody.
I wonder if it comes
Thanks,
down
audience.
tomorrow. I'm nervous.
Right. I said,
Okay.
Mark,
Love you all on the panel.
Susan, and I are all here still.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Steve, give Mrs. Steve a hug
guys.
for me.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.